My name is Claire Thomas, and I am 38 years old. 7 years ago, my father looked at my newly adopted son and said 7 words that broke our family apart. We wanted a biological grandkid, not him. My mother opened the door and pointed at the driveway. And I stood there watching my 15-year-old boy walk out to the car with nothing but a trash bag and a broken sense of worth. I took him home that exact same day. For 7 years I worked summer shifts, skipped vacations to pay for medical school, and watched my son rebuild himself from nothing. My parents never called, not once. But what happened at the hospital emergency room, what my parents discovered about who the top surgeon really was, that is something nobody in our family will ever forget. Where people face impossible choices and find the strength to stand their ground. If you are new here, this channel is all about family stories that test your limits and restore your faith. Drop a comment with your thoughts as you listen, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a story. My mother called me at 2:14 on a Sunday afternoon. Sleet hammered the windshield of our parked Civic in her driveway. Her voice came through the car speakers in pieces, broken by static and something worse, disgust, the kind of disgust that sounds like it has been directed at you your entire life. I pushed open her heavy mahogany front door before she finished her sentence over the phone. She was standing in the pristine foyer, arms crossed, staring at the manila folder in my hand and the 15-year-old boy standing beside me. He wore a faded red Chicago Bulls hoodie that was 2 sizes too big. He looked like a kid who had just been told he didn't belong anywhere. I did not ask for permission. I pulled him inside. I took off his wet jacket. I stood my ground. Some moments do not need apologies. They need a deep breath and a steady voice. My father stood up from his leather recliner in the living room and pressed his expensive golf shirt flat against his chest. His hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from fury. "We wanted biological grandkids," he shouted, "not some troubled street kid from Chicago." I looked at my parents, wealthy, 60 years old, standing in their $600,000 suburban home, looking at a boy who had survived the foster system like he was dirt on their rug. I had seen my parents be highly critical. I had seen them be dismissive after my average report cards, my modest wedding, and the time I chose to become a middle school speech pathologist instead of a corporate lawyer like my brother. But I had never seen them throw away a human being. "He is our son," I said. "That is not up for debate either." My father did not blink. He did not soften. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob were sitting on the adjacent sofa, holding crystal glasses of iced tea. Linda let out a sharp scoff, sneering as her eyes dragged up and down Leo's scuffed sneakers. Uncle Bob shook his head and muttered something under his breath. They did not say a word to me. They did not need to. We were a family that valued status above all else. My father served on the neighborhood HOA board. My mother hosted charity galas. We showed up to the country club every weekend wearing the right brands and driving the right cars. There was an unspoken rule in our house, and it sat at the center of every decision we ever made. Pedigree over people. Image over empathy. My mother had a phrase she used whenever I stepped out of line or showed too much raw emotion. "People are watching, Claire. Think of how this looks." Mike, my husband, stepped forward and placed a firm, protective hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo just stared at the floor. My mother stepped closer, her face drained of color, entirely devoid of her usual polished tone. She pointed a manicured finger right at the open door. "Take your bastard and get out," she screamed. Leo looked at me. I looked at our mother. "Mom, he is legally our child, not in this house." Aunt Linda leaned over and whispered something to Uncle Bob. I could see her eyes already cataloging the details of Leo's clothes to share with her friends later. My mother reached over to the side table, picked up the framed photo of me and Mike from our wedding, and placed it face down on the wood. "These frames are for real family members," she said. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed my son's arm. We walked out past the expensive vanilla candles burning on the console table, untouched and perfectly presented while our family shattered into pieces around it. I did not know it at the time, but walking out of that house with my newly adopted son was the last time I would speak to my parents for 7 years. My father sent a text message at 6:15 the next morning. His words were calculated and cold. "Cancel the adoption, apologize, and we can move past this mistake like adults." I was standing by the coffee maker in my kitchen when I read my father's text. "Cancel the adoption, apologize, and we can move past this mistake like adults." I stared at the glowing screen for a full minute. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Leo was asleep in the spare bedroom down the hall, his belongings still packed in 3 black trash bags on the floor. I typed my reply. "I am an adult, and I am a mother now." I hit send. Then I blocked his number. I sat down at the small laminate kitchen table and opened my banking app. $6,240. That was our entire safety net. I knew how much it cost to raise a teenager. I ran the numbers on a yellow legal pad. Groceries would double, clothes, shoes, school supplies, a state-mandated trauma counselor. We needed braces for Leo, which our basic dental plan did not cover. $6,240 would disappear in 4 months if we were not careful. I called the district office for my school. I asked the coordinator if I could take on the intensive summer speech therapy sessions. It meant working year-round with no break. She approved it immediately. My brother David called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the driveway pulling weeds. David is 34, a corporate tax attorney, and the undisputed golden child of our family. He lives in a gated community, drives a Tesla, and never makes a decision without running a cost-benefit analysis first. Growing up, if David got a B on a test, my parents hired a private tutor. If I got a B, my mother asked me if I planned to work at a grocery store forever. Mom is an absolute wreck, David said. No hello, no asking how I was doing. She had to cancel her country club luncheon because she was too embarrassed to answer questions about you. I pulled a dandelion out of the dirt. I am sorry her lunch was ruined, David. Don't be difficult. Just undo it. Call the state agency. You return the kid, apologize, and things go back to normal. It is like returning a leased car that has too many miles. You take the penalty fee and move on. I stopped pulling weeds. I looked at the front window of my house. Leo was sitting on the couch, watching a documentary on the television. He was holding a glass of water with both hands like someone might take it away from him. He is a human being, David. He is a liability, David replied smoothly. Look, I sent you a $100 Amazon gift card to your email. Treat yourself to a nice dinner. Cool off. Then fix this. I hung up the phone. I went inside, opened my email, and permanently deleted the $100 gift card. That was how my family handled emotions. They threw small amounts of money at a problem to look like they cared, while demanding complete obedience in return. The first 6 months of living with Leo were exhausting. Real life does not look like a movie. There were no immediate hugs or tearful bonding moments. Leo failed algebra. He hoarded granola bars under his bed because his previous foster homes locked the pantry at night. Mike and I barely slept. We traded off sitting awake in the living room when Leo had night terrors. We were stretched completely thin, running out of money, and deeply alone. Then Great Aunt Dorothy showed up. Dorothy was my late grandmother's sister. She was 72 years old, lived in a small brick house across town, and had not spoken to my parents in 5 years because she told my father he was a pompous snob at a Thanksgiving dinner. She pulled up to our duplex in a faded silver 2005 Buick. She did not bring an Amazon gift card. She did not tell me I was ruining my life. She brought 2 large trays of baked ziti and an older man wearing a faded green cardigan. Claire, this is my neighbor, Mr. Hayes, Dorothy said, walking straight into my kitchen and putting the food in the fridge. He taught high school math for 40 years. He is going to tutor the boy on Tuesdays and Thursdays, free of charge. I stood there, holding a dish towel, too stunned to speak. Dorothy looked at me, grabbed my shoulders, and gave me a firm shake. Your mother was a fool when she was 10 years old, and she is a fool now. You are doing a good thing here. We are going to help you. That was the first time I cried. I cried into the shoulder of a 72-year-old woman in my tiny kitchen while Mike shook Mr. Hayes' hand in the living room. Things started to stabilize. Mr. Hayes came over twice a week. Dorothy came over on Sundays to teach Leo how to make her famous pot roast. Leo slowly stopped flinching when doors closed too loudly. But it was not until laundry day in October that I realized exactly what kind of kid we had adopted. I was gathering dirty clothes from Leo's room while he was at school. He had left a heavy black spiral notebook under his pillow. I went to move it to his desk and a piece of paper fell out. I picked it up. It was not a note from a teacher or a drawing of a video game. It was a highly detailed hand-drawn diagram of a human heart. The ventricles and arteries were labeled with perfect, tiny handwriting. I opened the notebook. It was completely filled. Pages and pages of notes on cellular biology, human anatomy, and pharmacology. He had copied entire chapters out of advanced medical textbooks from the public library. He even had a small section tracking the prices of medical school tuition. My parents had called him a troubled street kid. My brother had called him a liability. But looking at these pages, I realized something that shifted the ground beneath my feet. Leo was not failing school because he wasn't smart. He was hiding his intelligence because every time he showed ambition in his past foster homes, he was mocked for thinking a kid like him could ever be a doctor. I sat on the edge of his twin bed, holding the notebook. I knew right then what my job was. I had to make sure this boy got exactly where he wanted to go, no matter what it cost Mike and me. Leo stopped in the doorway. The white plastic laundry basket in his hands hit the floor with a loud crack. He stared at the black spiral notebook in my lap. His shoulders pulled up toward his ears, and he took a half step backward into the hallway. It was the body language of a kid bracing for a lecture about wasting time or stealing books. I closed the notebook. I did not raise my voice. I patted the space next to me on the narrow twin bed. "Sit down, Leo." He walked over slowly. He sat on the very edge of the mattress, keeping his eyes glued to his scuffed sneakers. "I saw the drawings," I said. "The heart valves, the notes on pharmacology. How long have you been studying this?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Since I was 12. I used to hide in the public library after school. It was quiet there. Nobody bothered me." He finally looked up at me. "Are you mad?" "Mad?" I handed the notebook back to him. "Leo, this is incredible work. Why didn't you tell us you wanted to be a doctor?" His jaw tightened. "My last foster dad told me to be realistic. He said kids in the system learn to use mops, not scalpels." I felt a sudden, sharp ache in my chest. I thought about my own parents, living in their $600,000 house, telling me I was a failure because I chose to help middle school kids instead of making millions. I knew exactly what it felt like to be told your dreams were the wrong kind of dreams. He was wrong, I said. I looked him directly in the eyes. "If you want to be a doctor, you are going to be a doctor. But we have to fix this algebra grade first." For the first time since he walked into our house, Leo smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. The next 2.5 years were a grind. Real success is not a sudden miracle. It is a series of early mornings and exhausted nights. Mike picked up weekend shifts in the lumber department at Home Depot to bring in extra cash. I took on 4 more speech therapy students during the summer. Mr. Hayes came over every Tuesday and Thursday at 4:30 p.m., drilling Leo on calculus and chemistry until the kitchen table was covered in eraser shavings. The costs piled up fast. A $94 fee for the AP biology exam, $110 for college application fees, $250 for a used laptop from a pawn shop so Leo could type his essays. My banking app rarely showed more than $1,200 in checking, but we never missed a payment. I ran into my brother David on a Tuesday morning in April. I was at the local Chase Bank on Main Street. I was sitting in a cubicle with a loan officer, signing the paperwork for a $15,000 home equity line of credit to help cover Leo's upcoming freshman dorm fees. David walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He saw me, paused, and walked over to the cubicle. He glanced at the loan paperwork on the desk. He knew exactly what it was. "Still sinking money into a bad investment, Claire?" he asked. His voice was casual, like we were discussing a bad stock choice, not a human being. "Leo got accepted into the pre-med program at the state university," I said. I kept my voice steady. I did not let him see that I was tired. David smirked. He adjusted his expensive watch. "Pre-med, right. Anyone can declare pre-med. Let's see if he actually passes chemistry. A home equity loan for a foster kid is financial suicide, Claire. Mom and Dad ask about you sometimes, you know. They think you lost your mind." "Tell Mom and Dad I am doing just fine," I said. I turned back to the loan officer and picked up my pen. David stood there for another 3 seconds before walking away. He never asked how Mike was. He never asked how I was. 2 months later, we sat on the metal bleachers of the high school football field. It was June 14th. The sun was hot and bright. Great Aunt Dorothy sat to my left, holding a small bouquet of yellow daisies she bought from the grocery store. Mr. Hayes sat to my right, wearing his usual green cardigan despite the heat. Mike held my hand. We watched the principal call the names. Then, Leo Thomas. Leo walked across the stage in his blue graduation gown. He wore the gold honor cord around his neck. He looked out into the crowd, found our section, and raised his diploma in the air. We cheered so loud my throat hurt. There was an empty row of seats right in front of us. My parents were not there. Aunt Linda was not there. David was not there. But looking at Leo, standing tall and proud on that stage, I realized something. We didn't need them. The cage was completely gone. That night, Dorothy brought a homemade chocolate cake to our duplex. We sat in the living room, eating cake on paper plates. Leo walked over to me. He held out his leather-bound high school diploma and placed it in my lap. "I have to pack for the dorms tomorrow," he said quietly, "but I want you to keep this. It belongs to you and Mike as much as it belongs to me." I ran my fingers over the gold lettering. The high school years were officially over. The hardest part, the expensive, grueling reality of medical school, was about to begin, and the 7-year clock ticking toward my father's desperate hospital bed was already in motion. I ran my fingers over the gold lettering. The leather cover felt smooth and heavy in my lap. Mike gathered the sticky paper plates from the coffee table and carried them to the kitchen sink. Dorothy stood up, her knees popping slightly in the quiet room, and walked over to Leo. She reached into her purse and handed him a folded $50 bill. "Buy yourself a good breakfast tomorrow," she said. Mr. Hayes pulled a small, worn paperback dictionary from his cardigan pocket and handed it over. "Medical terms are just Latin and Greek, son. Learn the root words, and you will never get confused." At 7 a.m. the next morning, we packed 3 duffel bags into the trunk of the Honda Civic. The drive to the State University took 2 hours. We carried his bags up 3 flights of stairs to a small cinder-block dorm room. I made his bed with the cheap navy blue sheets we bought at Target. When it was time to leave, I hugged him tight. I did not cry until Mike and I were back in the car, merging onto the highway. The back seat was empty. The house was going to be very quiet. The next 4 years moved in a blur of FAFSA forms, late-night phone calls, and sheer exhaustion. College was not easy for Leo. He was taking organic chemistry, microbiology, and physics all at once. He worked weekends at the campus dining hall, wiping down tables to pay for his textbooks. Mike and I matched his effort. I picked up private tutoring sessions on Saturday mornings. Mike took on the night inventory shifts at the hardware store during the holidays. For 3 years, we did not take a vacation. We did not go out to restaurants. We ate a lot of spaghetti and store-brand tomato sauce. In November of Leo's junior year, my checking account dipped to $43.50 right before payday. I had to put back a $6 box of laundry detergent at the grocery store. It was hard, but it was a quiet, honest kind of hard. We were building something real. My parents were building something else. They were building a story. I found out during a run-in with Aunt Linda at the local Walgreens on a rainy Thursday evening. I was standing in the pharmacy aisle, holding a $5 pair of generic reading glasses and a bottle of store-brand ibuprofen. Linda turned the corner carrying a shopping basket. She was wearing a beige cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes immediately darted to my cheap reading glasses, then to my faded winter coat. She adjusted her grip on her basket, which held a $75 jar of anti-aging face cream. "Claire," she said. Her voice was dripping with that soft, performative pity people use at funerals. "It has been so long. You look tired." "I am working a lot, Linda. It is good to see you." I kept my voice neutral. She stepped closer, lowering her voice as if we were discussing a scandal. "Your mother tells everyone you cut her off. She cries at her book club about it. People feel just terrible for her." I looked at the fluorescent lights reflecting off the linoleum floor. My mother had thrown my son out of her house, but in her version of the story, she was the grieving victim. "Mom knows my phone number," I said simply. Linda sighed heavily. "Well, she has been under a lot of stress. Your father had a minor heart scare last month, mild palpitations. The doctor said he needs to watch his blood pressure. We didn't want to call you, knowing how much you are struggling financially with the boy." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Did he drop out yet?" I heard state college is usually too overwhelming for kids from his background. She did not want to know how Leo was doing. She wanted me to say he had failed, so she could go back to my mother and report that they were right all along. I put the ibuprofen in my basket. I looked directly into Linda's face. "Leo is taking his MCAT exams next month to apply for medical school. He is top of his class. Have a good night, Linda." I walked away before she could respond. I paid for my items at the front register. My hands were shaking as I swiped my debit card. Not from fear, but from a sudden fierce protectiveness. I realized then that my family was actively waiting for us to crash. They needed us to fail to justify the terrible thing they had done. 5 weeks later, the phone rang at 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. Mike and I were already in bed. I grabbed the phone from the nightstand. It was Leo. I sat up immediately, my heart pounding. Late-night phone calls usually mean bad news. "Mom?" His voice was breathless. The background noise sounded like a quiet library. "Leo, what is wrong? Are you okay?" "The scores came out," he said. His voice cracked. "Mom, the MCAT scores just posted online." Mike sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. He leaned in close to the phone. "What did you get, buddy?" Mike asked. There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could hear Leo taking a shaky breath. 518, Leo whispered. "I scored in the 96th percentile. I am getting into medical school." I dropped my head into my hands and started to cry. Mike wrapped his arms around my shoulders, burying his face in my neck. We sat in our small, dark bedroom and listened to our son cry tears of pure relief on the other end of the line. The long nights, the $43 bank balances, the skipped vacations, the brutal comments from my family, it all vanished in that one single number. The acceptance letter from the state's top medical university arrived in a heavy white envelope 6 months later. And just like that, the final phase of the 7-year clock began to tick. The phase that would eventually bring my father straight to Leo's door. The heavy white envelope from the university admissions office sat on our kitchen counter for a week. I couldn't stop looking at it. But the reality of medical school was not just a piece of paper. It was a terrifying math equation. Tuition was $41,200 a year. Even with the federal loans Leo qualified for, the living expenses in the city, the textbooks, and the mandatory medical equipment were astronomical. We needed $3,800 just to cover his first semester housing and his USMLE board prep materials. I was sitting at the table, massaging my temples, looking at our depleted savings account. Mike walked through the front door at 6:15 p.m., holding a slim white envelope of his own. He set it down on the table next to Leo's acceptance letter. Inside was a cashier's check for $4,000. "Mike," I said, looking from the check to him, "where did this come from?" "I sold the truck," he said quietly. He walked over to the sink and started washing his hands. Mike loved his 2004 Ford F-150. It had 180,000 miles on it, the paint was chipping on the hood, and the radio barely worked, but he had spent every Saturday morning for 10 years working on that engine. A guy from the lumberyard bought it in cash. I can take the 5:30 a.m. city bus to the store. It is only a 40-minute ride. I stood up and wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, pressing my face into his work shirt. He patted my hands. We didn't make a big dramatic speech about sacrifice. When you love your kid, you just sell the truck and buy a bus pass. 2 weeks before Leo moved to the city for medical school, an elegant, thick cream envelope arrived in our mailbox. The return address belonged to my mother. I opened it in the hallway. It was an invitation to my brother David's wedding. The ceremony was being held at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, a very formal, expensive affair. A small yellow sticky note was attached to the RSVP card. The handwriting was my mother's tight cursive script. "Claire, we have reserved one seat for you. Please leave your situation at home. We want an elegant, stress-free evening." They still couldn't even use his name. 7 years after the adoption, and Leo was still just a situation to them, a stain on their perfect family portrait. I didn't call my mother to argue. I didn't cry. I walked into the kitchen, tore the thick cream invitation into 4 pieces, and dropped it straight into the garbage can over a pile of coffee grounds. I didn't tell Mike or Leo about it. Some poison is better left in the trash. The 4 years of medical school pushed Leo to his absolute physical and mental limits. He practically lived in the hospital library. He drank cheap black coffee and slept in 4-hour shifts. When he came home for Thanksgiving during his 2nd year, he fell asleep on our living room rug with his anatomy textbook still open on his chest. Dorothy, who was now 76 and walking with a silver cane, draped a woven blanket over him and whispered, "He is going to save a lot of people one day." Match day arrived in the 3rd week of March. It is the day every medical student in the country finds out where they will spend their residency, the grueling years of hands-on training that determine their entire career. We stood in the crowded university auditorium. Leo held a sealed envelope in his hands. His knuckles were white. When the clock struck noon, he tore it open. He stared at the paper. He stopped breathing. "Memorial City Hospital," he read aloud, his voice shaking. "Cardiothoracic surgery." It was the most competitive surgical residency in the state. They only took 3 residents a year, and the boy my parents had called a troubled street kid had just claimed one of those spots. We celebrated with a $22 pepperoni pizza at a cramped booth down the street from the campus. Mr. Hayes, who had driven 2 hours with Dorothy just to be there, raised his plastic cup of Diet Coke in the air. "To Dr. Leo Thomas," he said. Leo looked at Mike and me across the sticky laminate table. He didn't have to say thank you. The look in his eyes said everything we needed to know. The kid who used to hoard granola bars was gone. In his place sat a brilliant, focused surgeon in training. Fast forward 3 more years. The 7-year clock was almost out of sand. Leo was now 25, a top-tier surgical resident working under Dr. Ivins, the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Memorial City Hospital. Leo was known for his steady hands, his calm under pressure, and his refusal to leave the hospital until every patient's chart was perfectly updated. He was making real money now, and the first thing he did with his first paycheck was buy Mike a reliable used Honda CR-V so he wouldn't have to take the 5:30 a.m. bus in the snow anymore. Everything in our world was finally peaceful. The struggles were behind us. The cage was a distant memory. But miles away, in my parents' pristine $600,000 house, a storm was breaking, and no amount of country club money or expensive vanilla candles was going to stop it. It started on a Tuesday evening in November. My father was at a neighborhood HOA meeting when he suddenly gripped the edge of the conference table. The color drained from his face. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave out completely. He collapsed hard onto the carpet, knocking over a tray of water glasses. The ice cubes scattered across the floor. A neighbor pulled out a phone and dialed 911 at exactly 7:14 p.m. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. My father, a man who cared about his public image more than anything else in the world, was loaded onto a stretcher in front of his entire neighborhood. He was clutching his chest, his face pale and covered in cold sweat. They rushed him to the upscale suburban hospital near their gated community. My mother arrived 15 minutes later. She walked into the emergency room wearing her beige trench coat, demanding to see the chief of staff immediately. But medical emergencies do not care about country club memberships. They put her in a small, windowless family waiting room with cheap plastic chairs and a ticking wall clock. My brother David arrived an hour later. He walked in carrying his leather briefcase, as if he could negotiate a deal with a failing heart. At 9:30 p.m., the local cardiologist walked into the small room. He did not smile. He held a digital tablet with my father's scans. "Your husband has suffered a massive aortic dissection," the doctor said. His voice was clinical and fast. "The main artery carrying blood away from his heart is tearing. It is a catastrophic event. We cannot fix this here. We do not have the specialized equipment or the surgical team for it." My mother gripped the straps of her leather purse. "Then transfer him somewhere that does. Send him to the best hospital in the state." "We are preparing the transport helicopter now," the doctor replied. "We are sending him to Memorial City Hospital downtown. But you need to understand the reality of this situation. He needs a miracle. He needs a highly complex multi-stage bypass and graft. The only person who can successfully perform this surgery is Dr. William Evans, the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. And the procedure, including the emergency transport and the specialized surgical suite, is going to cost upwards of $150,000 out of pocket because your private insurance considers Dr. Evans out of network for this specific experimental graft." David stepped forward. He pulled out his phone. "We can cover the $150,000. Just get the helicopter in the air." The doctor nodded and left the room. My mother sat down heavily on the plastic chair. For the first time in her life, her money and her status could not guarantee her what she wanted. Her husband was dying, and she had absolutely no control over it. At 2:15 a.m., my cell phone rang. I was asleep in my bed. Mike groaned and rolled over. I reached for the phone on the nightstand. The caller ID showed my brother's name. I had not spoken to David since he mocked me at the bank 5 years ago. I answered it. "Claire." His voice was not smooth or arrogant anymore. It was thin. It sounded like it was shaking. "Dad is at Memorial City Hospital." His heart tore. "They are prepping him for an emergency surgery right now, but the doctors told us to call the family. They said he might not make it off the table." I sat up. The room was freezing cold. For 7 years my father had treated me like a stranger. He had thrown my son away like garbage. He had demanded I apologize for showing love to a child who needed it. I had 100 reasons to hang up the phone and go back to sleep. But I am not my parents. I do not throw people away. "I am on my way," I said. I hung up the phone. I got out of bed and pulled on a pair of jeans and a thick gray sweater. Mike sat up and rubbed his eyes. "What is going on?" "My dad had a major heart attack," I said, grabbing my car keys from the dresser. "They flew him to Memorial City." Mike stopped moving. He looked at me, realizing exactly what hospital I just named. Memorial City. The exact hospital where our son Leo was currently on his grueling 36-hour surgical rotation. "Do you want me to call Leo?" Mike asked quietly. "No," I said. "He is working. He needs to focus on his patients. I am just going to go sit in the waiting room. I will text you when I know what is happening." I drove down the empty highway at 3 a.m. The streetlights flickered against the windshield. I parked in the massive concrete parking garage of Memorial City Hospital. The air smelled like car exhaust and damp pavement. I walked through the sliding glass doors of the intensive care surgical waiting area on the 4th floor. The room was large, filled with blue fabric chairs and a vending machine humming in the corner. My mother was sitting in the corner, staring blankly at a muted television screen. David was pacing back and forth near the windows, holding a cold cup of coffee. They looked up when I walked in. My mother did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She just looked at my old gray sweater and said, "They took him into the operating room 20 minutes ago. Dr. Evans is washing up now. They said the surgery will take at least 7 hours." I sat down in a chair 3 rows away from them. I did not try to hold her hand. We sat in total silence. The only sound was the hum of the vending machine and the soft squeak of nurses walking past the hallway doors. At 3:45 a.m., the heavy double doors of the surgical wing swung open. A tall man with silver hair wearing green surgical scrubs walked out. It was Dr. Evans. He held a clipboard in his hands. He looked directly at my mother and David. "Mrs. Thomas?" he asked gently. My mother stood up so fast her purse fell to the floor. "I am his wife. Is my husband going to live?" Dr. Evans sighed. "We have him stabilized on the bypass machine, but the tear is much worse than the initial scans showed. I am going to be honest with you. This is the most complicated graft I have seen in 10 years. I cannot do this alone." David stepped forward. "We are paying $150,000 for this. You are the chief of surgery. Fix him." "Money does not guide a scalpel, son, doctor," Evans said sharply, his voice carrying an authority that made David step back. "I am bringing in my top surgical resident to assist. He is the most brilliant set of hands in this entire hospital. If anyone can help me save your father's life today, it is him. I trust him completely, doctor." Evans turned toward the double doors. "He is scrubbing in right now. I asked him to come out here and walk you through the exact surgical plan before we begin the incisions. You need to sign the final consent forms with him." My mother nodded frantically. Yes, whatever you need. Bring him out." Dr. Evans pushed the heavy doors open and held them. Dr. Evans called down the hallway. "The family is ready." Footsteps echoed on the hard linoleum floor. Steady, calm, confident footsteps. A young man stepped through the heavy double doors. The rubber soles of his white hospital clogs squeaked softly against the linoleum. He was wearing dark green scrubs and a light blue surgical cap. A white mask hung loosely around his neck. He held a digital tablet in his left hand. His posture was perfectly straight. He did not look like a frightened teenager in a baggy hoodie. He looked like a man who held the keys to my father's life. It was Leo. My mother froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her purse. Her eyes widened, taking in his face, his scrubs, the stethoscope draped around his neck, and the Memorial City Hospital ID badge clipped to his chest pocket. David took a physical step backward. He looked at Leo, then at Dr. Evans, then back at Leo. I stayed in my blue fabric chair 3 rows away. I did not stand up. I knew Leo was on his 36-hour rotation tonight, but I had no idea he was assigned to this specific emergency. I sat in silence and watched my son look at the people who had thrown him away 7 years ago. Leo stopped 3 feet in front of them. He looked at my mother. He looked at David. His expression did not change. There was no anger in his eyes. There was no fear. He looked at them the exact same way he would look at any other family in the waiting room. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. She gripped the edge of the plastic chair. "Wait," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. She pointed a shaking finger at his chest. "Leo, how are you a doctor?" Dr. Evans frowned. He looked at my mother, then turned his head to look at Leo. "You know Dr. Thomas." My mother could not answer. She just stared at the boy she had called a bastard, the boy she had kicked out of her pristine house, now standing in front of her as the top surgical resident of the best hospital in the state. "We are acquainted," Leo said to Dr. Evans. His voice was deep, calm, and perfectly steady. He did not say, "She is my grandmother." He did not say, "That is my uncle." He set a massive iron boundary right there in the hallway. Leo stepped forward and held the digital tablet out to my mother. "Mrs. Thomas, your husband has a type A aortic dissection," Leo said, his tone entirely professional. "The tear is severe. Dr. Evans and I are going to open his chest, put him on a bypass machine, and replace the torn section of his artery with a synthetic graft. It is an incredibly high-risk procedure. We need your signature on this screen right now to proceed." David finally found his voice. It was loud, panicked, and dripping with the same arrogance he always carried. No, absolutely not," David said, stepping between Leo and my mother. He looked at Dr. Evans. "You cannot let him operate on our father. He is from the foster system. He is a street kid. He is not qualified for a $150,000 surgery." Dr. Evans' face instantly hardened. The warm, comforting doctor from 3 minutes ago vanished. He stepped right in front of David, invading his personal space. Dr. Thomas graduated in the top 2% of his medical class, Dr. Evans said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet level. He has successfully assisted on 14 of these exact grafts. His hands are the reason 3 of my last patients are currently breathing. If you want your father to live, you will sign that paper, and you will treat my resident with the respect he has earned. If you refuse, we will take your father off the bypass machine, and you can call a funeral home. Decide right now. The waiting room went completely dead silent. The only sound was the low hum of the vending machine in the corner. My mother looked at David. She looked at the furious chief of surgery. Then she looked back at Leo. The boy she had refused to claim, the boy my father had screamed at, was standing there offering to save my father's life while they insulted him to his face. She reached out and took the plastic stylus from Leo's hand. Her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely grip it. She signed her name on the glowing screen. Leo took the tablet back. He did not smirk. He did not gloat. He just nodded once. "We will send a nurse out with updates every 2 hours," Leo said. He turned around and walked back through the double doors with Dr. Evans. The doors swung shut with a heavy click. My mother slowly turned around. She finally noticed me sitting in the back row. She looked at my cheap gray sweater. She looked at my face. The reality of the last 7 years, the sheer weight of what she had thrown away and what I had built, crashed down on her right there in the middle of the room. She sank into the plastic chair, buried her face in her hands, and started to cry. My mother cried. The sound was hollow and sharp, echoing off the hard linoleum floor of the waiting room. I did not move from my chair in the back row. I did not walk over to hand her a tissue. I did not tell her everything was going to be fine. David sat down next to her. He stared down at his expensive leather shoes. He did not know how to handle a problem he could not buy his way out of. I stood up, walked over to the vending machine in the corner, and put in $2 bills. I bought a black coffee for $1.50. I sat back down in my blue fabric chair and drank it slowly. I was not nervous. My parents were terrified because they had placed their lives in the hands of a stranger they despised. I was calm because my father's heart was literally in the hands of the hardest working person I had ever met. The hours dragged on. The digital clock on the wall shifted from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. Sunlight started to creep through the large glass windows, casting long shadows across the empty chairs. A surgical nurse came through the double doors at 6:30 a.m. and again at 8:30 a.m. Both times she gave brief clinical updates. "He is on the bypass machine. They have removed the damaged tissue. They are measuring the synthetic graft now." My mother nodded each time, her hands gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles were completely white. David spent the entire time pacing the length of the room, occasionally stepping into the hallway to make hushed phone calls to his law firm to cancel his morning meetings. At 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mike. "How is it going?" I typed back. "Surgery is still happening. Leo is in there. He will fix it." Mike replied instantly. "I know he will. I made Dorothy's pot roast for dinner tonight. Tell him to come home and eat when his shift is done." I smiled at my screen. That was my family. A hardware store manager, a 76-year-old great-aunt, a retired math teacher, and a brilliant surgeon. We did not care about country clubs or status. We cared about showing up. At exactly 11:20 a.m., the heavy double doors swung open for the final time. Dr. Evans and Leo walked out together. They both looked deeply exhausted. The dark green scrubs were wrinkled, and sweat was visible at the edge of Leo's surgical cap. He had been awake and working for 31 hours straight. My mother jumped up from her chair. David stopped pacing. I stood up from my seat in the back row, but I stayed where I was. "Dr. Evans," my mother gasped, her voice completely hoarse. Is Frank alive?" Dr. Evans pulled his surgical mask down around his neck. He let out a long, heavy breath. "He is off the bypass machine. His heart is beating on its own. We are moving him to the intensive care unit now. He is going to live." My mother let out a loud sob and covered her mouth with both hands. David closed his eyes and leaned against the wall, dropping his head back. The relief in the room was so thick you could feel it pressing against the walls. Dr. Evans did not smile. He turned his head and looked directly at David. "You should know what happened in that room," Dr. Evans said. His voice was firm. "When we attached the synthetic graft, the tissue wall below the tear suddenly started to shred. It is a catastrophic complication. When that happens, the patient usually bleeds out on the table in under 60 seconds. My mother stopped crying. She lowered her hands. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Dr. Evans said. He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. Dr. Thomas caught the tissue tearing before the monitors even registered the blood pressure drop. He clamped the artery with his left hand and sutured the lower graft with his right in under 30 seconds. It was the fastest, most precise emergency repair I have ever seen in my 30 years of medicine. Dr. Evans looked from David to my mother. I told you money does not guide a scalpel. Skill does. You owe this young man your husband's life. Dr. Evans nodded to them, then turned and walked down the hallway toward the doctor's lounge. Leo stayed standing in the center of the room. He held his digital tablet against his side. He looked at the two people who had once ordered him out of their house like he was a stray animal. My mother took a shaky step forward. Her eyes were red. Her face was completely different now. The disgust and the pride were gone, replaced by a desperate, crushing guilt. She looked at Leo not as a burden, but as her savior. She wanted to bridge the gap. She wanted the 7 years of silence to vanish. Leo, she whispered. She reached her hand out toward him. Thank you so much. When your grandfather wakes up, we need to— He is my patient, Mrs. Thomas, Leo interrupted. His voice was not angry, it was not bitter. It was just a simple, unmovable fact. He did not step back, but he did not reach out to take her hand either. I will check his vitals again in 3 hours, Leo continued, his tone perfectly even. The ICU nurses will come get you when he is awake enough to see visitors. Have a good afternoon. My mother's hand dropped back to her side. The heavy silence fell over the room again. She realized in that exact moment that you cannot throw away a child and then demand to claim the successful adult he becomes. The boundary was set in stone. Leo turned away from them. He looked across the room and saw me standing by the vending machine. For the first time since he walked out of those surgical doors, his posture softened. The professional doctor melted away, and my son appeared. He gave me a small, tired smile and nodded his head once. I nodded back. I didn't need to hug him right then. I knew he had a pot roast waiting for him at home. He walked out of the waiting room, leaving my mother and brother standing in the quiet wreckage of their own choices. I did not stay to watch them pick up the pieces. I turned around and walked out the sliding glass doors into the cold air of the parking garage. I drove home with the radio off. When I unlocked the front door of our duplex at 5:15 p.m., the house smelled like roasted carrots and beef broth. Mike was setting 5 mismatched plates on the kitchen table. Great Aunt Dorothy was sitting in the armchair, resting both hands on her silver cane. Mr. Hayes was pouring a pitcher of ice water. 30 minutes later, Leo walked through the door. He took off his hospital badge, threw his jacket on the sofa, and sat down at the table. He was exhausted, but he was safe. We ate a $12 pot roast and laughed about a terrible joke Mr. Hayes told. That was real family. My parents spent the next 3 weeks trying to buy their way into it. My father was transferred from the intensive care unit to a private cardiovascular rehabilitation center that cost $1,200 a day. His chest was healing, but his pride was taking a massive hit. The problem with living a life completely based on public image is that secrets do not stay quiet forever. And in their wealthy suburban circle, gossip moves faster than an ambulance. I found out exactly how desperate they were on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked out of the middle school at 3:45 p.m. The parking lot was mostly empty. The smell of hot asphalt hung in the air. As I walked toward my 10-year-old Civic, I saw a brand new black Mercedes SUV parked next to it. My mother was standing by my car door. She was wearing a tailored navy suit. She held a thick brown manila envelope pressed tightly against her chest. She did not look angry. She looked like a woman who was losing a game she had played her entire life, and she was terrified. "Claire," she said, stepping forward. I stopped a few feet away. I kept my keys in my hand. "What are you doing here, Mom?" "Your father is getting discharged on Friday," she said quickly, her words running together. "His heart is doing well. The graft held perfectly." "I am glad to hear that. Have a safe drive home." I reached past her to unlock my car door. She blocked the handle with her arm. "Wait, please. I came here to do the right thing." She held out the brown manila envelope. "David hired someone to look into Leo's financial situation. We know medical school is expensive. We know he has over $210,000 in federal student loans. Your father and I want to wipe the slate clean. There is a cashier's check in here for the full amount." I looked at the thick envelope. For 7 years they had let us drown. They had watched Mike sell his beloved truck to pay for Leo's dorm. They had watched me put back a $6 box of laundry detergent. They had known exactly where we lived and never sent a single dime when Leo was just a kid trying to pass high school biology. But now Leo was a top surgeon. He was a prestigious asset, and my parents only invested in assets. I did not take the envelope. I did not even raise my hand. Put your checkbook away, Mom. You cannot buy a time machine. Her face tightened. The polished, polite mask slipped just a fraction. Claire, do not be stubborn. This is a life-changing amount of money. We want to support our grandson. He was your grandson 7 years ago, I said, my voice low and completely steady. He was your grandson when you called him a bastard and threw him out of your house. He didn't need $210,000 back then. He just needed a family. You made your choice. She dropped her hand. The envelope slapped against her side. She looked around the empty parking lot, checking to make sure no other teachers were watching us. The old habit of protecting her image was still running deep in her veins. People are talking, Claire, she finally whispered. The truth was leaking out. Aunt Linda told her book club about the surgery. The whole country club knows that Dr. Thomas is the boy we turned away. They look at us differently now. Your father's friends are whispering behind his back. We are becoming social outcasts. I stared at her. The sheer emptiness of her performative sympathy was standing right in front of me. She did not drive out here because she felt guilty for hurting Leo. She drove out here because hurting Leo was finally hurting her reputation. Next month is the Memorial City Hospital Annual Charity Gala, my mother continued, her voice sounding desperate now. Your father's company bought a $10,000 table. Dr. Evans is giving out a Surgical Excellence Award that night. We know Leo is getting it. We want you and Mike and Leo to sit at our table. We want to take a family photo. We just want to show people that we are all on good terms. She wanted a photo. She wanted to use my son as a prop to clean up her public image. I unlocked my car door. We are attending the gala, Mom. But we are sitting at a table with Great Aunt Dorothy and Mr. Hayes, the people who actually showed up. Claire, please. She reached out, her fingers grabbing my coat sleeve. If you do not sit with us, the entire hospital board will see that our own family hates us. I pulled my arm away. I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel like I was never enough, simply because I didn't care about the things she cared about. Then I guess they will finally see the truth, I said. I got into my car, shut the door, and drove out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched my mother standing alone on the hot asphalt, holding a $210,000 check that nobody wanted. But the real confrontation was not going to happen in a parking lot. It was going to happen in front of 500 people. The Memorial City Hospital Annual Charity Gala took place on a Saturday evening in the Grand Ballroom of the downtown Marriott. At 7:30 p.m., the massive room was loud with the sound of clinking silverware and a live string quartet. The air smelled like roasted steak and expensive perfume. I wore a $45 navy blue dress I found on the clearance rack at Macy's. Mike wore the only dark suit he owned. Great Aunt Dorothy sat next to me in a modest floral blouse, holding her silver cane, and Mr. Hayes wore a black tie paired with his usual green cardigan. We were seated at table 42, near the back of the room, right next to the kitchen doors. We did not mind. We were just happy to be there. My parents were seated at table 4, directly in front of the main stage. My father was looking much thinner, but he was dressed in a custom tuxedo. My mother wore a silver sequined gown. David sat next to them in a tailored suit. My father's company had paid $10,000 for that table, and it was surrounded by the wealthiest donors in the city, including several members of my mother's country club. There was one empty chair at table 4. My mother kept turning around in her seat, looking toward the back of the room at our table. She was still hoping Leo would walk over, sit in that empty chair, and let the event photographer snap a picture of the happy, reunited family. Leo did not walk over. He was sitting next to Mike, drinking ice water and reviewing his patient notes on his phone. At 8:45 p.m., the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The crowd grew quiet. Dr. Evans walked up the short stairs to the main stage and adjusted the microphone. "Good evening," Dr. Evans said. His voice echoed across the large room. "Tonight, we are here to raise money for our pediatric wing. But we are also here to recognize the people who make Memorial City Hospital great. Every year I give the Surgical Excellence Award to a resident who goes above and beyond the call of duty." My mother sat up perfectly straight. I could see her from across the room, touching her hair, preparing for the spotlight. 3 weeks ago, I performed a highly complex $150,000 aortic bypass, Dr. Evans continued. During the procedure, the patient suffered a catastrophic tissue failure. I am standing here today to tell you that the patient is alive and recovering only because of the brilliant split-second actions of my chief resident. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Leo Thomas. The room erupted into applause. Leo put his phone in his pocket. He stood up, buttoned his simple black suit jacket, and walked down the long aisle toward the stage. As he passed table 4, my mother leaned forward and clapped loudly. offering him a wide, bright smile. Leo did not look at her. He walked up the stairs, shook Dr. Evans' hand, and accepted the heavy glass trophy. Leo stepped up to the microphone. The ballroom went completely silent. "Thank you, Dr. Evans," Leo said. His voice was calm and steady, echoing through the speakers. "I love my job. I love taking care of people, but I did not get here by myself." My mother adjusted her posture. David pulled out his phone, ready to record the speech. The country club members sitting at the adjacent tables leaned in, smiling politely, waiting for the young doctor to thank his prominent, wealthy grandparents sitting right in the front row. "When I was 15 years old, I was placed into the foster system," Leo said. The smile on my mother's face instantly froze. David lowered his phone slightly. "I was told by a lot of people that kids from my background do not belong in nice neighborhoods," Leo continued, his voice never rising, never sounding angry, just stating the honest truth. "I was told I was a liability. I was told to be realistic and learn how to use a mop instead of a scalpel." The wealthy donors at the front tables shifted in their seats. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. "Medical school is hard," Leo said, looking out over the crowd. "It takes a village. But a real village is not built on DNA, and it is not built on bank accounts. It is built on the people who show up when you have absolutely nothing to offer them in return." Leo pointed toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen doors. "I want to thank my great-aunt Dorothy, who taught me how to make a perfect pot roast so I wouldn't eat out of vending machines. I want to thank Mr. Hayes, a retired high school teacher who tutored me in math twice a week for free because we couldn't afford extra help. I want to thank my dad, Mike, who sold his only truck so he could pay for my freshman dorm room." He paused. He looked right at me. "And I want to thank my mom, Claire. When other people told her to throw me away, she looked at me and told me I was exactly where I belonged. This trophy belongs to table 42. The crowd broke into a massive standing ovation, but the applause did not start at the front of the room. It started at the back, and it rolled forward. People were wiping their eyes. Dr. Evans was clapping loudly. I looked at table 4. My parents were completely trapped. The spotlight, the event photographer, and the eyes of every single country club member in that room were completely focused on Leo. He had named his family. He had listed exactly who paid his way, exactly who tutored him, and exactly who showed up. He did not say a single negative word about his grandparents. He didn't have to. The utter silence regarding their existence was the loudest statement in the room. My mother's shoulders collapsed. She stared down at her untouched plate of catered steak. My father sat perfectly still, his face pale, staring blankly at the empty chair next to him. David put his phone flat on the table and rubbed his temples. The wealthy friends sitting around them were looking at my parents with pure confusion, doing the math in their heads, realizing that the prominent Thomas family had completely abandoned this brilliant young doctor. Leo walked off the stage. He did not stop at table 4. He walked the entire length of the ballroom, came straight to the back, and placed the heavy glass trophy right in the center of our table, right next to Mr. Hayes' water glass. The gala ended just before midnight. My parents did not walk over to our table when the lights came up. I watched them gather their coats and slip out the side doors of the ballroom, keeping their heads down, desperately avoiding the eyes of the wealthy friends who were suddenly whispering behind their backs. The empty chair at table 4 remained empty until the catering staff began clearing the room. 6 months passed, the kind of months where the dust finally settles and you can see exactly what remains. The social fallout in their suburban circle was absolute. Aunt Linda called me on a Tuesday morning while I was driving to the middle school. She did not sound arrogant anymore. She sounded deflated. "Your parents are listing the house," Linda said over the car speaker. "They bought a condo in Arizona. David is transferring to his law firm's branch out there to be with them. Your mother had to step down from the charity board." People would not stop asking her about Leo at the country club. The silence was just too loud for them. "I hope the warm weather is good for Dad's heart," I said. My voice was calm. I meant it. "Are you going to call them before they pack up?" Linda asked. There was a desperate edge to her question. "No, Linda, I am not." I pressed the red button on my steering wheel and ended the call. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel a sudden rush of victory. I just felt an overwhelming sense of quiet. The people who had spent my entire life making me feel small were leaving, and my world was not going to change at all. They were running away from the shame of their own actions, packing their expensive vanilla candles and moving across the country to start a new image somewhere else. I let them go. On a rainy Friday afternoon in April, I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of our hallway filing cabinet when my hand brushed against a thick paper edge. I pulled it out. It was the original manila folder, the adoption papers from 7 years ago. The exact same folder I had gripped so tightly in my parents' pristine living room the day they threw us out. I ran my fingers over the bent edges. I did not burn it. I did not dramatically throw it in the trash. I just placed it neatly in the back of the cabinet, right behind our tax returns and Mike's old truck registration. It was just paper. It didn't hold any power over me anymore. That Sunday evening, our small duplex was incredibly loud. Leo had the day off from the hospital. He was sitting at our scratched laminate kitchen table, carefully wrapping a new electronic blood pressure cuff around Mr. Hayes' thin arm. "Stay still, Mr. Hayes." "No talking during the reading," Leo instructed, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "I taught you calculus, son. I know how a machine works," Mr. Hayes grumbled, but he was smiling. The machine beeped. Leo checked the screen. 118/78. "You have the heart of a teenager. Whatever Dorothy is feeding you is working." Great Aunt Dorothy was sitting in the armchair in the living room, pointing her silver cane toward the stove where Mike was stirring a massive pot of spaghetti sauce. "More garlic, Mike. You are cooking for a surgeon, not a bird," she called out. Mike laughed and tossed another handful of minced garlic into the pan. I leaned against the kitchen doorframe and watched them. I watched the retired math teacher, the 76-year-old great aunt, the hardware store manager, and the brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon. None of us matched. None of us had the right pedigree. But the room was so full of warmth it felt like it was glowing. For the first 30 years of my life, I thought love was a performance. I thought it was something you had to earn by wearing the right clothes, making the right salary, and keeping up the perfect image so people wouldn't judge you. I used to think I saved Leo from the foster system, but looking at my messy, loud, beautiful kitchen, I realized the absolute truth. Leo saved me from the cage. He forced me to decide what kind of person I really was. He gave me the courage to stop begging for a seat at a table where I was never truly wanted. Family is not an image you protect. It is a choice you make, every single day, when the bank account is empty and the nights are long. We made our choice, and I would not trade this small, crowded kitchen for all the mahogany front doors in the world. If you have ever had to build your own table because the one you were given had no room for you, then you know exactly what this kind of quiet, hard-earned peace feels like. Take a moment today to appreciate the people who showed up for your journey when you had nothing to offer them but yourself. If this story resonated with you, please leave a like and subscribe to join our community of shared, honest experiences. Thank you so deeply for walking this path with me.